My name is Mohammed Irshad. I am the chairperson of the MSA at University of Witwatersrand. Alhamdulillah, first we'd like to welcome you guys to the launch of Center for Islamic Research Africa. We, the MSA, we cater for all Muslim students and we look after our Muslim students on campus, alhamdulillah. Earlier this year, Sarah had approached us to partner with them on this launch. And we didn't know much about the organization. We didn't know much about the people. But alhamdulillah, we were excited to hear that such an event is taking place, and we were glad to partner with them. As young people across very different, diverse careers, we often look for employment abroad, and abroad often means other continents. We often overlook Africa as places for greener pastures, for employment, and a place to transform economic activity. But the main thing is we need to know where our Muslim brothers and sisters lie. Through our engagement and partnership, we hope to help chart and transform our understanding on Muslims in South Africa and in Africa as general. From Congo to Sudan, from Cuba to the Middle East, there's a lot of problems that we don't look at. But we often overlook it, but we have to understand where our Muslim brothers and sisters lie in order to understand what we can do differently and think different, how differently we can think. We are honored to have you all join us here today, and we thank Sarah for the opportunity to partner with them and hope that we can often partner on such events again and grow our understanding. Jazakallah khair.
Thanks for that, Irshad. I'd like to call on Hafiz Uthman Musa from Masjid Luqman, and it's very apt that he's joining us here today. The masjid is named after Maulana Luqman Wadi, and those of you that know a bit about him, he used to do relief aid in various parts of the African continent and passed away on a road trip to Mozambique during the floods in the process of doing aid work. So Hafiz Uthman, Jazakallah for your time. Please join us here.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
If you can just lower the table.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. تبارك الذي جعل في السماء بروجا وجعل فيها سراجا وقمرا منيرا وهو الذي جعل الليل والنهار خلفة لمن أراد أن يذكر أو أراد شكورا وعباد الرحمن الذين يمشون على الأرض هونا وإذا خاطبهم الجاهلون قالوا سلاما والذين يبيتون لربهم سجدا وقياما والذين يقولون ربنا اصرف عنا عذاب جهنم إن عذابها كان غراما إنها ساءت مستقرا ومقاما والذين إذا أنفقوا لم يسرفوا ولم يقتروا وكان بين ذلك قواما والذين لا يدعون مع الله إلها آخر ولا يقتلون النفس التي حرم الله إلا بالحق ولا يزنون ومن يفعل ذلك يلقى أثاما يضاعف له العذاب يوم القيامة ويخلد فيه مهانا إلا من تاب وآمن وعمل عملا صالحا فأولئك يبدل الله سيئاتهم حسنات وكان الله غفورا رحيما صدق الله العظيم.
Jazakallah khair for that, Hafiz Uthman. That was an absolutely beautiful recitation. So earlier this year, when we tried to speak to people about the setting up of this organization, and we wanted to know who would be able to assist us and put their names to this organization and really help in terms of the founding establishment of the organization, we approached Attorney Nadeem Mohammed, and without question, without asking any real details about what this is about, agreed that he would serve as a board member of this organization. We want to thank him for that and for making available part of his office in Greenside to SIRA. So we now have office space as well. That really gives us, a place where we can conduct meetings, do our work, and become a more established organization. So we want to welcome him, and he's going to share a little bit more about the organization, what it does, its focus. And we've spent a long time deliberating this and discussing what exactly we need to be looking at on the African continent, given the vast number of issues that the continent faces. So you'll share a bit more about where we think this organization needs to be going. I think there should be a plug point here somewhere.
I can work it out. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Ahlan wa sahlan. Welcome. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence at this inaugural launch of SIRA. It doesn't matter where you hail from in Africa, whether your greeting is bon dia, bonjour, como estás, ahlan wa sahlan, or marhaba. We are united by one singular phrase, and that is Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Center for Islamic Research Africa, Islam and Africa. These are two words that are inseparable. Since the beginning of its birth, Islam has found stable, fertile soil for its development and its nourishment in the lands and plains of Africa. Over 1400 years ago, Islam found refuge across the Red Sea on the African continent. Abyssinia, today Ethiopia, provided a home for early Muslims who had accepted the message of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They were being persecuted for their faith by members of the Quraysh in Mecca and in the Arabian Peninsula. Two groups left for Abyssinia, requesting asylum for the just African king, Ashama ibn Abjar, the Najas, or Najashi as it's known in Arabic. The conversation between the cousin of the Prophet ﷺ, Jafar ibn Abu Talib radiallahu anhu, and Najashi is well documented. Presenting their case against the Quraysh, Ja'far radiallahu anhu recited from Surah Maryam, the chapter on Mary in the Quran, which resonates deeply with the bishops of Najashi's court. Najashi's response: verily this recitation and what has come from Moses has emerged from the same lamp. You are released. By Allah, I will never surrender them, the asylum seekers, to the Quraysh. If you have had an opportunity to read this, and if you haven't, put it on your bedside table and read it nightly. Mapping Muslims in Africa. When I first was asked to join this organization by my emirs, shrugged my shoulders and I said, well, what it was initially called then was CARE, Center for African Islamic Research. Anyway, meeting after meeting, I still wasn't really too sure. Then I was given this book by our Emir for the organization, Ismail Vadi. 3 pages in, I was actually quite embarrassed. I had no understanding, I had no knowledge of the sheer effect and consequence of Islam in Africa. As we started reading and as I read more and I started looking at the stats, and the other speakers will elaborate more on this, and we start looking at us in the southern hemisphere, in the southern part of Africa, in South Africa, and we number 2 million Muslims in this country. And you start looking at the 1.5 billion Muslims in Africa. And then you do a quick statistical check and you say, well, 49% of that population is Muslim. Of the 1.5 billion of the population, 49% of them are Muslim. Almost 750 million Muslims in Africa and on the African continent. What do we know about them? Other than the fact that, well, certain factions fight each other, certain of them are infiltrated by what is referred to as fanatic and extremist forces and organizations, that they're poverty-stricken, that's true, that they have no governments to talk of, or at least that the governments can't effectively govern themselves. Again, it's also very true. But what we don't know is how deeply rooted these nations and this population are in Islam. The mapping of Muslims in Africa and the organization SIRA shows, or aims at least, to now research and analyze the political, social, economic situations that the Muslims in Africa are facing. And with that research, eventually to report and to create policies which are underpinned by Islamic values and principles. And hopefully one day, the use of Islamic jurisprudence to effectively govern these nations and Muslims that reside therein. From the north of the continent, sources suggest that Islam reached southern Africa in the 8th century already, as Arab merchants traveled to northern Mozambique. These are our neighbors. Mozambique is literally on our border. But Islam arrived at the southernmost tip of Africa via sea routes that stopped over the Cape of Good Hope in Dutch ships bearing Muslim slaves and political prisoners from Southeast Asia. There's a book that I read recently called When the Crocodile Eats the Sun. It's a book written by an ex-Rhodesian, and he says something prolific in the opening paragraph. He says, the worst thing to happen to Africa was the arrival of the white man. The second worst thing to happen was their departure. If you understand that Africa didn't need these people, and that Islam didn't need these people, and that Islam flourished when it started already at the inception of its foundation in Africa, then one would very quickly sit back and ponder, well, what did we do wrong? Or where did we go wrong? A few years ago, Muslim organizations marked 300 years of the Quran in South Africa, highlighting the role of early Muslims. In the Cape, we established the first organized Muslim community in South Africa with the building of Awal Masjid. Later, indentured laborers and merchants from India saw Islam being established in the interior, and together with the burgeoning local Muslim population and migrants from other parts of Africa, today are part of a diverse set of Muslims in South Africa. I mentioned, and I will mention it again, there is a substantial lack of knowledge. While Islam has developed its roots on the continent, we must critically reflect on the lack of knowledge that we here in South Africa, our tiny minority of Muslims on the population of the continent, have about Islam and Muslims in Africa. Central African Republic, Sudan, North and South, as I mentioned again earlier, Mozambique, Malawi. I mean, we know all about moon wars. We're not even really yet prepared to accept that they've sighted the moon, and that we can also accept that the moon is sighted on our continent, and that we can start with Eid or Ramadan, or end with Ramadan and start with Eid. Why, we must then ask ourselves why we will sooner see ourselves in Bali for a holiday than on the shores of Lake Malawi or Mozambique. I had this discussion recently with a colleague of mine. He says, you know, he's so excited. And I said, why? He says, well, he was going to go for Hajj, and then he kind of thought to himself, but it's not enough really to go for Hajj, but what can he do with the money? And I said, well, how much you want to spend? He says, no, 100,000 Rand, give or take. I said, okay. Taking the whole family. He says, yeah, wife and 2 children. I said, where do you want to go? Maybe Bali or Mauritius. I said, have you ever been to Kenya? He says, why would I go to Kenya? Have you been to the north of Mozambique? No, but isn't there fighting in the north of Mozambique? Have you ever been to Egypt? Yeah, but I'm not so sure about the political situation, and are they Muslims or are they not Muslims? Are they Shia? Are they not Shia? Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, it's this incredible lack of knowledge that has tainted our continent, and by extension tainted Muslims and our religion on this continent. In South Africa, our diverse Muslim population across race, culture, and increasingly across national identity should prompt us to develop a new discourse and to set up stronger ties with our fellow Muslims across the continent. And I'm not simply talking about grabbing a group of your friends, rushing out to one of those poverty-stricken villages and putting up a well and saying, now that you've done your part. Alhamdulillah and mashallah for that, and may Allah reward us all. But that is not the be-all and end-all of understanding the circumstances and the paradigm which is Africa. We need a mindset and vision in which we situate ourselves as part of the wider ummah. What are these problems that are facing the ummah as we speak, not only on the continent but the world over? This broader vision is important because of the very difficulties that the ummah faces today, globally and specifically on the African continent, as I mentioned. As it stands, very few of us know why senior Muslim politicals are being jailed in Tunisia, or why communities in Nigeria were recently bombed by the United States of America. We may not fully understand why all of a sudden Israel is moving to recognize Somaliland. Let's stop for a second and remember that the statistics I mentioned said there are almost 750 million Muslims on the continent. Or about the role of foreign forces in the Sudan conflict, and who controls those foreign forces. We may not worry too much about the new scramble for African resources in the DRC, and we are rich. We are rich beyond measure in national resources on this continent. Nor about the sheer scale of Chinese port development across African countries. This, I'm sure, something you have seen firsthand with your own eyes. Buildings of highways, buildings of buildings, ministries of defense, ministries of justice, all built by the Chinese for free. Why? For land, space. We may not be aware of why the US and UK military forces are so interested in the Chagos Islands of the coast of Mauritius, or why Russian mercenaries are actively engaged on the ground in the Sahel. Here in South Africa, we may not be systematically tracking attempts to pressure government into dropping the ICJ genocide case. All of these things, which are mere snapshot from several African countries, have an impact on Muslims, and in many instances have been impacted on by Muslims. As global politics shift to the right and radicalize and racialized and Islamophobic narratives become normalized, and as interest-driven politics becomes the order of the day, we need to understand what is happening around and why it is happening. Using credible information and thorough analysis, we must be able to respond to the multiplicity of challenges. What is CIRA's main mission and purpose? What are we aiming to do, and how are we going to do this? The how, well, we're going to let our Amir Ismail Vadi tell us how, and we'll just listen to him. When he says jump, we'll ask how high. The why, well, he's explained that to us. Our objectives: develop a knowledge base and about Islam on the African continent in Muslim majority and Muslim minority countries. Analyze the incidence of political, economic, ethnic, religious, and social instability and conflict on the African continent and its impact on Muslims. Initiate academic research that centralizes anti-imperial and anti-apartheid thought, both in its contemporary and historical context. Counter and reshape narratives that seek to undermine Islam and Muslims on the African continent and beyond. Counter Islamophobia and Zionism, and ultimately, their reporting. Promote the potential of South Africa and the African continent in strengthening and empowering the Muslim Ummah. As I indicated to you, the how: research, analysis, sense-making, convening discussions, workshops, talks, engagements, both locally and on the continent. Networking, extending solidarity and amplifying existing work. The arranging of our counterparts and ensuring that those relationships with our counterparts are strong and trustworthy and reliable. Writing, speaking, and sharing information. We hope that our research will find relevance and further be championed by various advocacy and humanitarian-based organizations, religious institutes, and media houses within the Muslim community and beyond. For the benefit of the wider public, we hope that it will resonate with others across the continent and globally who have similar interests in Islam and justice and positive development on the African continent. I just want to give you a very small, brief introduction to who is CIRA. I mentioned already Ismail Vadi, and we all know who he is. You can literally just type his name into a Google search and you get tired of reading his accolades, mashallah. CIRA has at its base the three directors, myself, I'm an attorney. Some of you may know me. Not very good one. If you do need a good attorney, I'll refer you to somebody. Ziad Omar, he's an advocate, exceptional in his craft and really brilliant in research and writing. And of course, someone who needs no mention, Shabna Mayat, also an advocate of the High Court of South Africa and now currently research expert, activist, and really just an all-round good, strong Muslim, somebody who is a defender of Islam and the rights and the promotion of such rights and principles, not only in our continent, but the world over. Someone for whom I am certainly very grateful to have on our board. Then we have Mulana Abdul Razak Okwayo, who's supported by a wider advocacy group and a small staff base who we will have based in Johannesburg, a few researchers who are excellent, and who is going to be very necessary for purposes of what it is that we hope to achieve and to aim. For now, we're small. We're tiny. We operate out of one of my offices in my greater office. There is not a lot of funding, and inshallah, we will receive more as we go along. But I know what Muslims need. They want to see action and they want to see progress. And once they see that, they're happy to throw their money into it. And inshallah, we hopefully aim to attract as much as you can provide. we understand as Sira that this is not going to be an easy task. We understand that we are facing, and I don't want to be too direct, but we understand that we are facing challenges, which challenges are effectively going to cost us time and energy and resources. But if our niyyah is pure and our goal is defined with the support of the Almighty and the Ummah, there's nothing that we can achieve. Jazakumullah so much for coming and for listening to the talk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khair, Nadeem, for those insights. I want to call on Ibrahim Tembisa Fakure. And Mr. Fakure, when he's not traipsing around the world, and I follow him on Facebook, I see him all over the world, then he's on our TV screens providing analysis, often about what's happening in the Middle East, what's happening throughout the African continent. We're very grateful for your presence here today, and we look forward to your SWOT analysis of Islam on the African continent.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, salatu wassalam ala Rasulullah amma ba'd. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam.
It gives me a great pleasure to be here today to join this very important and ambitious project. And I'm really proud, and I would like to congratulate Ismail, Vadi, and the team, including Zakira, for the wonderful work and the initiative that they've started. Whilst most of us are engaged in work and professional work, some of us have to think. Some of us have to strategize in terms of how we see and view our world. And I think we have been engaged largely on the execution of programs, and we've left the space of thinking to others. And as a result, we found ourselves wanting now and then in terms of how to move forward. And this is why this project is very important, because it seeks to provide and present a space at which people can think and strategize. Because there's no time actually to do that for many of us who are busy doing other things in the world. So we have to encourage these platforms, the think tanks, and the public intellectuals and people to start thinking on how we see our world, because there is largely bankruptcy in terms of thought. And in some instances, it's also reserved to certain, permanent spaces and qualified individuals, and other people who are capable of thinking are discouraged from thinking because the space is defined and somehow and sometimes reserved to certain people, deliberately, of course, so that they can continue perpetuating the same kind of evil and injustice and all the bad things that we see happening and proliferating around the world. So we need more and more people to start entering this space, but it can only thrive if we avail resources. It's no longer a humble ask. I think all of us have got a responsibility, particularly those of us who are involved in OCA and involved in the protection and the promotion of resources for the facilitation of the preservation of Islam, to fund these kind of institutions. It's something that's key and very urgent. We can't just be printing the Qur'ans and bringing the masajids, which are plenty at the moment. There are other things that are urgent that we need to start doing. And we start by identifying people who are willing to do this business of thinking and activism and help them do the work that they're supposed to be doing. It's our responsibility. We have to start doing it. And if we don't do it, we are in serious challenge, I would like to believe. I was given the task of talking about the SWOT analysis. I'm not quite sure what that is. well, I know what it means, like strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But from the perspective of African Islam, it becomes very difficult. But again, it's an important discussion to have. And it's important because I think there is a disintegration of the central command structure. In other words, these platforms that have been traditionally in charge of deciding when is Eid, what time we're supposed to be praying, etc., they're all going to be disintegrating. And they're going to disintegrate because they are others who have since entered South Africa. They've got their own command structures. But the challenge, of course, is that you don't know who they are and what they do. But there are many of them. So the day before the official Eid, which was, I think, on Saturday, for those of you in Rosebank was filled with people, colorful, wearing scarves, celebrating their Eid. And then you begin to realize that actually now we've got other structures that are commanding control in this country. It's no longer certain centers. But what worries me is that I don't know what these structures are doing. And I don't know on whose behalf are they going to be doing whatever it is, given this polarization, anger, and challenges that we're facing around the world. All of us are beginning to have our own online imams and bosses who tell us when, what time, and what to do. And that is one of the weaknesses or blind spots that I think South African Muslims are going to be facing in due course. The lack of knowledge of the understanding the other. I'm not quite sure how many of you do have a chance to go to a place called Mogadishu in Mayfair. I do have a chance now and then to visit Mogadishu. Totally different world. Certain imams, there's amirs, and they are good Muslims, and they're doing what they're expected and supposed to be doing as Muslims. But we don't know what they're doing at the same time. And you know, I'm speaking amongst friends here and brothers and sisters, so we need to be open about what's going on. And I think it's important for us to understand if we are to lead and be taking charge of Islam in South Africa, we've got to understand precisely who's who, what, and what they're doing. And for those of us who had an experience of living elsewhere, we know the repercussions of being blind spotted from those that surround you. So that's one of the weaknesses, I think, is important. And we can do this by applying certain, of course, tactics and strategies, whether it's workshops, whether it's bringing young people together, whether it's having joint conferences, etc. But we need to understand who's who, where, and what we are doing, particularly given that we are in minority in this country. So there must be charge. So the threat of disintegration of the command structure in South Africa is problematic. And it's a blind spot that I think we need to be looking at very seriously. The other weakness that I think exists, please tell me when I'm about to. The other weakness which I think exists is that we've seen how other religions, particularly the Christian Zionists and including some of the ultra-Orthodox Jews, are beginning to use their religion to solve problems, geopolitical problems. All of them are calling on their religion to try and understand politics, whether it's in Palestine or the United States. But Muslims have been very hesitant in doing that for obvious reasons. Everywhere you look around, the ultra-Orthodox Jews are very confident in using their injunctions from the Torah on how they should live their lives, and they're supported by governments. United States, we see this as well happening. But Muslims are hesitant in beginning to apply Islam outside religion and prayer on how we should live. And as a result, you therefore have the internet imams taking control of our young people. And they're giving them all kind of solutions because we are not brave enough for reasons that most of us are, of course, afraid that we might not be allowed to go for Umrah or Hajj next time. So we have to kind of, behave a bit. But that might just be very dangerous, because we have solutions within our religion on everything. But you can't just be religious and telling people continually to pray, but not getting engaged and involved in social, political, and economic agencies that we see embracing us all the time. And again, I like to believe I'm speaking amongst friends, even though I'm recorded. People talk, for example, and God forbid, the biggest threat and worry of everyone is a nuclear Iran. And I was telling some of the people that actually the biggest threat that everyone must be worried about is the call for jihad. And by the way, it's also disintegrated, given that there's now this proliferation of online imams. So it's not the nuclear that's supposed to be worrying people. What's supposed to be worrying people is one day a brave Maulana or an imam saying the word. And it's a matter of time. So again, this is the blind spot. This is a weakness that could be out of our control. You asked me to talk about weaknesses, so I have to be honest and open about what weaknesses I anticipate. So this blind spot is a ever-present danger. And again, with the disintegration of the central command in terms of the direction from the Maulanas and those that continue to control us, not only do they continue to agitate us and make us more irritated because they make wrong decisions, and we start searching for alternatives, chances are the young people are going to find alternatives online, and we'll be back to square one. So that's another weakness that I think we need to look at. But importantly, I think Muslims need to be more involved in terms of giving us a way forward politically. How do we deal with this evil regime called Israel, for example? How do we deal with the 9.5 million Muslims, Sunni Muslims in Iran, that we conveniently not make dua for when we make dua in Jummah? This is an important discussion, right? The assumption is that all Iranians are Shia. But guess what? We've got 9.7 million Sunni Muslims in Iran. So you're not doing anyone a favor by insisting and encouraging this avoidance when making dua for Muslims around the world. In fact, we make dua for Saudi Arabia. The same regime that chopped the body of a good friend of ours into pieces, and they melt them into an asset in Turkey, in Istanbul, and now suddenly they are good human beings, and we make dua for them on a daily basis. Now, these are the kind of questions that we, amongst friends, we have to raise and talk about. Again, another weakness and a blind spot that I think it's important. But there's also a strength within Muslim communities, and this is we are fairly well off. We have a good life, and Allah has blessed us with comfort. And that comfort can be used for various things in terms of supporting causes and supporting institutions. But at the same time, the comfort can also be a weakness. And the weakness is that we tend to compromise on principle because we are all now obsessed with comfortable lifestyle. And activism is taking a back seat. And I'd like to call upon you now that activism is not a part-time occupation. Activism is a full-time occupation. All of us must go back to the drawing board and resume our responsibility on trying to change this world and living it better than we found it. So whilst it's nice for us to travel the world and, have a good life, but we need to remember that wherever you are, there is a socio-economic imperative and a cause that you need to embrace. You can't be telling me that there's nothing wrong in Greenside or in Lenasia or in Houghton. There is something wrong there, whether it's stray dogs or cats. But it is a cause that we have to embrace to ensure that the stray dogs and cats are taken care of. So there's no excuse of not being part of this new activism that I'm calling you to get engaged in. Because everywhere we are living at the moment, there is a cause to be embraced. And we need to embrace those causes. Sitting comfortably in our luggers is no longer an option, given what's going on around the world. And we'll be held accountable, by the way, at some point by generations to come and our kids, if we don't take this serious. I tend to get too emotional when I talk about these things, so forgive me, not upset. The other important point, which is also a strength, and it was supposed to be my discussion today. So I've been reading the Treaty of Hudaybiyah, when Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam had to negotiate with the Quraysh, who prevented him from entering Makkah to go and present and prepare and perform Umrah. And they were told you must come back 3 months later. By the way, it had nothing to do with religion or going to heaven. It was an Arab culture. The Umrah and the Hajj, it was not in any way or form about Jannah. So Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam decided they were going to take Muslims to go and perform, whether it was Umrah or Hajj, but he was prevented from doing so by the Quraysh. And then they started negotiating. And the reason why this is interesting and important is because of Trump's 21-point plan and 15-point plan. It was a form of negotiation by Muslims, by the way. Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and the Quraysh, they came with like a long list of what they want. Actually, Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was only looking at 2 things out of 15. And he kept on saying, okay. And eventually they thought they were winning. But actually, what did he want? He wanted the Muslims to be allowed to go back, which was the case. The Quraysh were happy that Muslims could be expelled from Medina back to Makkah if they become Muslims. But they also want to go to Medina, were not allowed to do so. But what did they do? It actually allowed Muslims to go and impact and change the society. So by the time the Quraysh realized, there were 60% Muslims. And that's why Muslims came in without any difficulty or pushback, right, when they conquered Makkah, because of the Treaty of Hudaybiyah. And I encourage you to go and read it. It's an amazing political reading. Now, why am I narrating the story of Hudaybiyah? It's because of this opportunity that we have because of our opulence, the lifestyle that we have. You know, I know so many communities, for example, now in some places in Johannesburg, contrary to some people who are saying there's a rise of Islamophobia, I know that many families or non-Muslims, whenever there's a Muslim family with kids next door, they get excited and they encourage the kids to go and play with the kids next door because Muslims are good kids and people generally. And this is what's happening. When I became a Muslim or reverted to Islam some time ago, my mom used to say, leave this boy, whatever he does, he's a good guy, leave that religion of Indians. Now this is it. This is the advantage that we have as Muslims. We have a good life. We have our families put effort and concentration on education. You know, we sleep on time, or some of us, we sleep on time, we watch wrong things, we listen to right things, we smell right things. We have a good community that many people would like to be associated with. And that's another opportunity, I think, on the SWOT analysis, on how do we go about making sure that we mix with different people, we spend time with these people without saying a word. People observe and they like what they see from ordinarily from Muslims. Not because, you know, the nur, like some of us have. But, you know, people want to be associated with Muslim because they know that you are on the right path, in the path of straight path, and your kids are likely not to get into trouble. I'm not saying all Muslims are that, but the majority of Muslims in all our spaces, Muslims are respected precisely because of that. So that is the opportunity that I think we need to use, particularly with the integration with Muslims from African continents or other African continents. There's another weakness, though, that I see happening, and for those of us who spend time in the townships. So there's a new trend of Islam that's emerging. We were speaking not long ago with my colleagues about how the last Eid during the Takbir, we had our own Zulu Takbirs. It's a new culture that's formulating. You've got Muslims in the townships who are dressing in a different way, defying the Orient look or garb. You have Muslim girls. I don't know if you've seen them. They are all funky and all of that. But within all of that, there's resentment. And that's what's worrying me. A resentment which seeks to shape a new form of Islam. So there's ownership of Islam, but at the same time, there's resentment. In other words, they are seeking alliances outside their brethren and sisters. And that is another weakness that we have. And we need to look at that urgently, because it is proliferating not only within the Gauteng Muslim communities. KZN is exactly the same. If you go to some of these gatherings that we have, there's a clear distinction. In fact, an extent that we had a big discussion last time whether we should have biryani or pop. It was a useless discussion because all of us enjoy biryani, but guess what? It's not about a pushback. And the discussion then, we decided we're going to have pop and some meat. Not because we enjoy pop and meat, but we just wanted to be African Muslims. Now, that's what is worrying me with this anger that I see brewing in various townships. And this is one thing, before we look at the overall African experience and contribution, we need to look at our own backyard and see what is currently happening. It's positive, by the way, it's exciting. We've got these nasheeds everywhere, people singing in Zulu and bringing the name of Allah in the mix and all of that. But there is resentment in it, and that's what concerns me. And we need to look at that as one of the weaknesses. The ever increasing cleavage between the established Muslims and the developing Muslims is something that we need to look at. And for example, the previous marches of black Muslims who went to Pretoria, they were not necessarily complaining about the incompetent government. They were complaining about the treatment they are receiving from their own brethren, which was not the issue. So it's a low hanging, or was a low hanging, to accuse others of your own situation. So it's something that I think we need to look at. I'm about to finish. The Shia-Sunni divide is also likely to impact intra-Muslim relations. Notwithstanding, of course, that all of us celebrate the large existence of Muslims in other African countries, but we forget that not all of them are Sunni. Sizable number of them are Shia. If you go, for example, to Zaria in Kaduna State in Nigeria, Ibrahim Zakzaki is a Shia cleric. On Fridays, he shuts down the streets. He's a sizable, respected leader in that part of the world. So what are we talking about? The integration of African brothers, whilst at the same time, we are not condemning this ever-expanding problem between Sunni and Shia Muslims. It's going to have an impact in terms of pushing back our gains, because if you go in with a Sunni flag in many African countries, we are going to have a problem, particularly now with Iran, I think, is likely to sit on top of the food chain, which therefore means the cultural desks, again, we're speaking to edit that, cultural desks of various embassies of Iran are going to concentrate on making people Muslims, which means they're going to be Shia Muslims. And how we're going to deal with that. I'm not saying it's a weakness, it is a threat from a Sunni perspective. Because we are not going to be stopping what's coming our way. And I'm of the view that this is the case, especially with the shutting down of Strait of Hormuz and the monetization by the Iranians of the Strait of Hormuz. You are likely to have the Houthis doing the same on the Red Sea. But the Red Sea, of course, has got two challenges, which is the weather, the water going down, and big ships can't go past. But importantly, the Houthis who are also going to be Shia, which therefore means there's going to be a lot of money coming Iranians' way, which therefore means Iran, our brothers there, are going to have more money, spare change to propagate their own understanding of Islam, which, of course, have not been shy about saying that they are on an expansionist mode, right? Because they're in minority, and as a result, they're going to be involved in expansionist projects of Shia expansionist projects. So I've decided I'm going to call myself Sushi, which is Sunni Shia. And that, I think, it will help in a way. So that's another blind spot. I mean, however we want to take it, that I think we need to look at. But importantly, in conclusion, we need to realize that as we do this research, the instrument of research have changed. The manner in which we present and communicate our findings in research have changed. Writing 3,000 word long documents is no longer relevant. We need to find ways of how we transmit our findings in research. I've decided to arrogantly call myself a public intellectual. In Zulu, we call them umfundisi, which means you are constantly on the pulse and you can comment on what's happening around the world. Because if you don't, someone else is going to do it on your behalf. So when we were doing news with Bilal, often what happened was we will rely on someone in Harvard University to comment on situations in Johannesburg. And the reason that was the case, one is because of the inferiority complex of some of the people in the newsroom who believed that anything that came from England was better and pure. But importantly, there was no one available to give commentary on what's going on. So you have all of these podcasts now and television. They require people to articulate themselves in a manner that is understandable. But also it's not just about articulation, it's about how you look, how you present yourself. All of that is key in this new world of podcast and television. If you don't look the part, nobody cares, nobody's going to invite you. So those are the kind of things that I think are also important in terms of training our people, having a group of individuals from the center who are going to be ever ready to comment on television, to give analysis. In the absence of that, they're going to get some Orientalist somewhere who's going to tell us about what's happening within Sunni Islam and how Mohammed bin Salman is a traitor and currently negotiating with the Americans to go and hit Iran. And we've got no choice but to believe it, right? Which is true, of course. So these are the kind of things that we have to be aware of. So we have to prepare ourselves. Again, the weakness that we have is that we don't have people who are already fit for purpose who can comment and articulate their position. And in that absence, you have other people who are doing it on our behalf. And maybe the center will move away from a paper-intensive center into the center that, of course, we still need to do proper research. But that research must also be summarized in a way that it help and change and articulate our position. Because at the moment, you know, the confusion, for example, of what's going on, and it has to be said right now, the confusion of what's going on, and I think it would be amiss of me to go sit down without saying this, the confusion that we currently experiencing in terms of understanding the Iranian politics, I think it's very important. It's got nothing to do with going to heaven. It's got a lot to do with geopolitics and justice. And I think as soon as you understand that, no, there's no heaven involved here. It's just geopolitics and justice. And people who are conveniently fighting our own cause against one particular country that has continually embarrassed us as Muslims and as Ummah. And they've taken up, you know, they've got their own problems. I mean, they've got own arrangements and, you know, insulting our Sahaba, etc. I understand all of that. But right now, you have a group of individuals who have decided to fight, to restore the dignity of the Ummah and Muslims. Instead of us busy scrambling whether there's Sunni or Shia or the whatever, I think we need to support the cause. The only country that has stood for Palestinians and the only country that has kind of tested the shock absorber of the so-called Israel with its impenetrable defense system from 1,800 kilometers away, passing the airspaces of other countries, entering into airspace of Israel with the multi-layered Iron Dome, and still hitting them. I mean, this is unbelievable. As I'm sitting there and my kids are sitting there, there's an element of pride restoration after all of this embarrassment and the humiliation that we've gone through. But what we find convenient in our masajids is to begin to have this discussion about Sunni or Shia. And when we make dua, you hear the guys making dua and you think, okay, he's going to say Iran, skips Sudan, nothing else. And you wonder why it's not said. Why are we not helping and praying? Okay, forget about the Shia, but why are we not praying for the Sunni Muslims who are 9.7 million of them in Iran? So these are the kind of things. Once again, thanks very much for the opportunity. I hope I didn't speak too much, but all the best and good luck for your initiative, inshallah.
Thanks for that, Mr. Fukudi. Now, as Nadeem was speaking and Dembisa was speaking, I've kind of been trying to get a sense of what the reaction is in the room. And, on some points, I see some of you cringing. On other points, I see you nodding vigorously. What I think is important about what we're hearing here today is that there's an importance for dialogue and discussion. And it's important that some of these dialogues come out into the open and we thrash out the issues. We may disagree with each other on a number of points and we may agree on a number of points, but the importance is having the discussion. And we shouldn't shy away from these discussions. Because ultimately, as Mr. Fikudi said, at some point we do need to be articulating a position on some of these issues. And at this point in time, I don't think many of us have a position on many of these things because we're not exactly sure how to articulate it, or there may be uncertainty about being assertive about a certain point or not. So thank you so much for those insights. And I did forget to mention, Mr. Fukudi is formerly with Al Jazeera, and also now currently with Africa-Asia Dialogues. He heads up that institute. So a lot of the discussion that he's brought to the fore here will take place through that forum as well. Thank you so much for your time. Now, I have a big problem with our next speaker because he happens to be my father. And my big problem is, you've heard that he's the Amir of this organization, is that during Ramadan, it was like in the middle of Ramadan, it was Seri, early in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning. I woke up completely, lost in my own thoughts. And my father comes to the table cheerfully. Did you do this? Did you finish this on the task list? Is this ready for the launch? And I thought to myself, good God, is this going to be a daily occurrence where I have to give a report back about the organization at 4 in the morning? Nonetheless, he's done a substantial amount of work speaking to a number of organizations over the last period about the setup of SIRA. And it's really his brainchild that has led to the establishment of this organization.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Ibrahim, thank you very much for a very interesting and thought-provoking discussion. The world is changing. It has changed already. If anybody wants to forecast tomorrow, you can't do it. It's unpredictable. 5 or 6 weeks ago, we never thought that there would be 11 countries in the Middle East at war with each other. The Hajj of this year may not take place, we don't know. So those things that we took for granted and we thought were certain are suddenly becoming uncertain and unclear. And everything that Ibrahim has said, the systems of power, of how thinking is done, how ideas are disseminated, who is leading, who is directing, who is giving the religious instructions, is changed. Today, people can access information about Muslims and Islam on their fingertips. Fatwas are given on the cell phone. You don't need a mufti. Once upon a time, when I was growing up, there was one mufti in Transvaal, Mufti Sanjalvi. Today, the muftis come by the dozens, and everyone gives a different view. Before you can even start applying your mind, there's a fatwa out already on WhatsApp. This one is a kafir and that one is that. We're going nowhere. We're going nowhere with that kind of approach to religion, to belief, to your own sense of inner morality and spirituality. It's taking us nowhere. So we have to rethink. And that's the problem with the Muslim community, at least in this country. I don't want to talk about elsewhere. I don't know enough about Muslims elsewhere. We refuse to think. And we want certain answers on the spot. And if this one is we're comfortable with this one, we agree with this one. Tomorrow we agree with somebody else. And you know, we are master at gossiping. You heard what this one said. You heard what this one said. You heard this fatwa. You checked this WhatsApp. But we don't think. We don't want to study. We don't want to read. We don't want to analyze. We don't want to give ourselves time to work through issues. When the world is as in turmoil as it is, there are no ready-made answers. So, if you're asking for a fatwa from Syria, you're not going to get a fatwa from Syria. It's not our intention. Our intention is to study. It doesn't mean that a few of us will study everything. There are any number of very capable academics, thinkers on the African continent who are producing things. Except that in South Africa, maybe it is a function of the apartheid legacy. Because we think in Africa it's about wealth, about charity, about humanitarian aid, about taking Islam, about printing Qurans. We never think of Islam on the African continent as we are recipients of insight, of spirituality, of progressive thought. So I was telling Ibrahim that we will invite any number of scholars, ulama from other parts of the world. I'm still waiting for a day, I'm 66 years old now, and in a few days' time, for a great scholar from Africa, Muslim scholar from Africa to come and talk to us. Nobody has bothered to invite. Maybe Okaf did some things, I know. But there's no name that stands out. So there's nobody, or is there somebody? There are people. It's just that we haven't bothered to extend the invitation, and we haven't been humble enough to learn from somebody else. We have amongst us a degree of intellectual arrogance. And linked to that is spiritual arrogance, because we think we are the best Muslims. So, I'm going to take you through this. I'm going to read everything for you, right? But let's just go to page 3. Let's just work. This is deliberately done like a madrasa textbook. Because one of the guys we were discussing, he said, but wouldn't we improve the layout? I said, no, I couldn't improve the layout. I want you to scribble on this thing. I want you to write. I want the corners to be twisted like an old telephone directory book. But you don't throw the telephone directory book at all, because they're in the old days. Torn and tattered as it was. This is what it must become. So let's go to page 3. So we've heard that there are probably 500 to 600 million or maybe more Muslims on this continent. And we are 2 million. We actually know very little. But the more important thing, the average age, the median age on this continent is 19.3 years. So 20 years old. The average age on the African continent is 20. So if there are 500 or 600 million Muslims, the vast majority of them are 20 years old. They don't have the deep Islamic thought that you might have had in this country. What's the Islam? What's the ideological, theoretical, spiritual framework? This is an opportunity. If we can shape, I'm not worried about yesterday's people. I'm not worried about my age category of people. My concern is the next generation. What is their outlook on this continent, and what is their paradigm, their thinking about Islam, and what Islam means to them in this continent? Our young people are going already listening to many other scholars using the cell phone. They're not waiting for the old religious muftis and to give them something. They're not waiting for you. You know, I was shocked when Umar Suleiman came to Joburg here. Was it Gallagher? I didn't want to go. This man said, here's a ticket, please go. I went. I saw 5,000 people there. 3,000 were young Muslim girls, young Muslim women. I never saw so many young Muslim women in one gathering. And I had to ask myself the question, how is it these people are responding to this guy who's coming for Ethiopia to give a talk? One talk in Joburg. How is it that they're relating to him? How is he reaching them? Made me think. 3,000 of them were young Muslim women there at Gallagher Estate. That place was packed. By 2:30, there was no place. So something is happening beyond ourselves. We're not understanding this new generation. Let's go to page 5. You see the map, it's very stark. The north, Islamic, 90% predominantly Muslim. The south and Central Africa, a minority of Muslims of different population sizes. Okay? If you go to page 6, now in South Africa, maybe the Hanafis are dominant. Western Cape might be more Shafi. But if you look at North Africa, it is unbelievable. The predominant school of jurisprudence in Islamic thought is unbelievable. There are many things. The other day we were watching Eid Namaz on one of the TV stations on Saturday. And the Imam in the second rakat didn't make the 3 extra takbīrs. And I said, hey, that's all you must here. Only to discover that he was a Shafi Imam. I didn't know the basic things. But we will be very quick to pass judgment because we think ours is the only way. So it's important to look at the doctrinal trends. If you go to page 7, there are significant minorities. Look at Ethiopia, 35%, Tanzania, 35%, Eritrea, 36%, Ivory Coast, 42%, Guinea-Bissau, 45%, Ghana, 15%, and then of course we are about 2%. So we have to begin to analyze the dominance of the North and trends there, and then of course these are significant minorities. And place that within the geopolitics of each country and try and understand what's happening. Languages, you turn over languages. There are 2,000 languages on the African continent. I met Ambassador Saad Kachalia a few days ago. He's our ambassador in Zambia. So I just said, what's happening there with Muslims, etc. He says, you know what, Ismail, there are 73 languages in Zambia. I almost fell off the chair. I said, what, 73? I said, are they dialects? He said, some of them are completely different languages in one country. And there's no religion without a language. And no culture without a language. What do we know? If we turn over, a very distressing image on page 12. If you look at the whole Sahel region, from West Africa to East Africa, is a conflict zone. Whether it is Al-Qaeda, whether it is ISIS, Al-Shabaab, Boko Haram, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, has any number of acronyms you can find. Look at the displacement of populations. These are Muslims who are being displaced. In Sudan today, it's what, 14 to 15 million Muslims are displaced. I was asking a Maulana the other day, who must I make dua for in Sudan? He said, I don't know what's happening, but make dua for the Ummah. I said, no, who must I make dua for in that country? We don't know, because we don't even know the dynamics there. So if you turn over, regional movements, page 13. Parliamentary and reform movements. At the moment, the An-Nahda party in Tunisia is not banned, but most of its leaders, the secular party leaders are in detention. Sheikh Rashid Anushi, I met him in 1996 when he came to South Africa, the leader of the An-Nahda. He's in detention now for I don't know how many years. He's 84 years old. He was sentenced to 14 years. He refused to go and make representation. He said it's a mock trial. Anyway, his lawyers appealed. They increased the sentence to 20 years in absentia. But he's in jail at the moment. And there's few more trials, charges against him. So basically, the Tunisian government has sentenced him to death already. His family is in exile. What do we know about Tunisia? You can tell me about the soccer team, Tunisian soccer team. But do we understand the political dynamics, the suffering, the trauma, the pain, the repression that is taking place there? We marched to the Israeli embassy. Have we ever considered making representation to the Tunisian embassy in this country? There is an ambassador here. Have we ever thought about it? Not to go and argue, but to have a discussion as the Muslim community. Let's meet the ambassador and say, look, man, what's happening in your country, man? It can't continue like this. There must be and not to argue, showcase South Africa how national reconciliation can take place, how national unity can be built. Go and share our experience of resolving conflicts and put the country first. So I'm not going to go through all the various, what they call extremist groups or Islamist groupings, etc. But if you look at page 15, you can see the range of flashpoints and the different types of organizational actors. And it's violence. They are using violence as a tactic of war and of conflict. Influential Muslim business groups, page 20. We trade all over, we want to go and trade. Have you seen how many, in Muslim countries, how many billion-dollar companies there are? Okay, so in South Africa, there's 147. But do we know any of the other major Muslim business outfits, enterprises on the African continent? Maybe some people have some dealings with them, I don't know. Let's go to page 21. In South Africa, we only know of 4 Sufi tariqas in the main. As the Qadri and the Chishti are more dominant. The Naqshbandi is less so, I think. And the Suhrawardi is hardly known because they are more Uzbekistan-based at origins there. But if you look at North Africa, West Africa, East Africa, there are Sufi tariqas, orders that go for 1,000 years. 1,000 years old. There's a tradition. So there's the Tijaniya, the Qadiriya, the Muridiya, the Shadiliya, the Ba'alawi. Have we ever invited a sheikh, a grand sheikh, a genuine, not a fake, a genuine, spiritually enlightened person from this part of the continent to say, come and talk to us in South Africa? It's not in our mindset. It's not in our frame of mind. So we've got a lot to think about. If you go to page 23, I'm not going to go through all of those things. There are different types of movements. There's the Salafi movements. There's a hardline Salafi, there's a soft Salafi, there's the Tabligh movement, there's political reforms movements, there's Sufi movements that are deeply political. And in their country, they are politically very, very influential. They shape political discourse. That's how entrenched some of these Sufi movements are. Do we understand them? Do we know anything at all about them? Let's move on to Muslim intellectuals, page 27. Never even heard of these people. In all the literature, I think most of us have read Islamic literature, etc. Never even heard of these people. So there's not a blind spot. Actually, there's a significant deficit in our thoughts, in our thinking, in our learning. our Islamic institutions, whether they're the Muslim schools, the madrasas, the Darul Ulums, we are stuck in the past. We are genuinely stuck, even Muslim schools. There's nothing that I find that is changing, that's dynamic, that's forcing our learners to think. New ideas. They don't even know our own history because we've abandoned history as a subject, as a secular subject. But in the process, we abandoned Islamic history as a subject. Muslim female leaders on the African continent, page 29. There have been several, a long time ago, Muslim female prime ministers on this continent. At least I included Dr. Naledi Pandor. She's a significant figure. We might not appreciate her adequately in this country, but she's made a very profound impact. Talk to people from other parts of the world and look at her diary, where she's being invited. But no major organization will invite her in this country. Sacrificing time, but let's just go through some of these things. I've just got a section on Muslim scientists. You can read that on your own. There's a few other things. Muslim political analysts. I know when we were at university, Issa Sifji, Samir Amin, these were names that we were Muslim political theorists. Yeah, they were radical theorists. But they gave us inspiration about looking at colonialism and post-colonial societies. Today's generation, nobody even reads them. Mahmoud Mamdani, his son has now become the mayor of New York. We don't even go back to some of these old scholars. Page 35. South Africa has got some significant Muslim historians. I can tell you one who is very close to me, Professor Ghulam Wahid, University of KZN. He's an outstanding historian. I have yet to see a major Islamic organization invite him to speak. And a more humble person I won't find in a hurry from an academic point of view. But nobody invites him. Muslim social analysts, there are so many on the continent. I don't know so many of them. I've just sort of included more of the South Africans that I know. Muslim jurists. Late Judge Ismail Muhammad, Justice Ismail Muhammad, his reputation globally and the African continent is unmatched. But in this country, we have hardly celebrated him as a Muslim community. Yes, we named the street after him in Tshwane. But we don't know the intellectual power that this man exercised on jurists throughout the world, his thinking. But we don't celebrate him. I've yet to see a major Muslim organization giving him an honorary award or posthumous award. Now, Muslim research institutes, of course, there can't be many in this country because we don't think. But I want you to go to page 41. You see there are secular institutions. So as I was doing work around this, I came across this think tank for the research of Islam and Muslims in Africa, RIMA. I said, man, that's what we want to do here. Who are these guys? And I started looking, I couldn't find the information. It's an Israeli-based think tank. It's based in Israel. The head is Dr. Moshe Terdeman. And they've got a MOU with Orange Free State, with Professor Hussein Solomon. It rings a bell. They are researching South Africa, African Muslims already in Israel. We're starting today only. And the title, if you read that, you won't know what is this think tank about. They've published a 726-page book of collected articles on Muslims in Africa. Most of them deal with radical Islamist extremist organizations in the Sahel. Muslim cultural organizations, I'm not going to go through that. Time is short. Page 45. I want to spend a few moments on this. This is a great strength of organizations in this country, is the humanitarian work we are doing throughout the continent. Great work. That humanitarian work is from emergency relief. It's now going to some charitable work, but is now going into a developmental perspective. Very good. But you know what? They've got feet on the ground. They've got context on the ground. But it's only that work. We don't get the benefit of the knowledge of that society coming back to us. Nobody's interpreting it. Nobody's writing it up. But they are the people on the ground. So can we use these networks to broaden the scope? The primary focus is this, but can we begin to generate knowledge and information and feed it into the center? So we're asking the humanitarian charitable organizations, let's see if we can't work, and can we collaborate a bit more on some of these things? In one country, there are 4 or 5 South African organizations doing similar things. Yes, but there's no turf war. Let's work, learn to cooperate. Very many good organizations, I must say. Muslim media platforms. Strength on the continent is radio. Muslim radio stations, many countries got them. TV, it's only Al Jazeera in the main, and then Hilal and ITV. But the radio is the most powerful instrument. I was asking some of the humanitarian organizations that are working there, is there any progressive Muslim journalists, radio journalists that we can link with? I said, no, we don't know. We have to start thinking about these things. Muslim social media influencers. You may not like it. Mufti Menk has got 13 million followers on TikTok. He's the only name that comes up from the, let's say, from the establishment, the ulama. There must be something that he's getting right if he's got so many followers. You might not agree with his message, and you might knock him and say, this is all haram and all media platform and all that. There's a Muslim musician there, Kari Lamey, 162 million followers. And he's actually a committed Muslim. His music, all that, is very Islamic. He doesn't hide his Islamic identity. I don't think you can find another artist with that kind of reach. We don't know about it. Quickly, page 51, Muslim celebrated sportsman. Muhammad Salah, 200 million followers. We're in South Africa, we don't invite him. Why not? He is one of the greatest footballers of all time. But we don't invite him as a guest to this country. Here we've got, last page, Samira Mal, she's living in Roshni. She's seated number 8 in table tennis championship in Africa. Origin from Lens, she lives there near Yunus and them. We don't even know her. Hashim Amla, the greatest cricketer on this continent, there's no doubt about it, from the Muslim community. Where is he today? So I'm going to pass. Zain Bika has got a big name on this continent. All right, so let me conclude. Zakir is getting a bit agitated. Last page, page 55. Page 55. You know Maulana Rabat, he was in Wombats. He came out with a thin booklet like this. 40 Sahaba Ikram from Africa, companions of the Prophet ﷺ, from Africa. You know, I took that book and I treasured it. Because we never we think of the Sahaba, the companions, the close companions of the Prophet, we think they're just Arab. And other than Bilal, radiallahu anhu, we don't think a little bit differently. So at least we've got the names of the companions and their successors. And Ibrahim and Nadim has made the point that the first roots of Islam were on the African continent, outside of Arabia. So, my last sentence. The time has come for us to turn ignorance into awareness. And this is the center to do that research, to network with academics on the continent, Muslim academics, to disseminate that in a popular way, It won't be a book all the time. Young people want in different formats. We will have to see how we disseminate. Jazakallah for coming, and I hope that you will read this tonight. Tomorrow I'm testing all of you. All the facts and figures.
Jazakallah khair for that. And I'm hoping that this is the first of many booklets and publications. Our website is up and running, still has a few technical glitches, but a lot of this information, as we come out with these thought pieces, not the 3,000 word ones, hopefully shorter, we will share it there and on our social media platforms as well. You'd see a banner outside with those details. Please do share, please do follow us as well. I'm going to call up Advocate Ziad Umar, who's also part of SIRA, just to give the vote of thanks. While he's coming down, I want to make two announcements. Naledi Pando was mentioned here. As we know, Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, remains closed at the moment. And the Kathrada Foundation is having a commemoration for Uncle Kathy tomorrow at West Park Cemetery. I think it starts at 9 o'clock. And Naledi Pando will be speaking there. So let's go out and show our support to that. And the second announcement is that SIRA will have its first webinar on the 14th of April. In the evening, we're getting Professor Shamil Chapi to speak about the Sudan and the historical context that has led to the current crisis that we see unfolding. So we'll share the information with that, and we look forward to seeing you there as well. Siad?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. All praise is due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Lord of the worlds. Peace and blessings be upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Respected scholars, distinguished guests, esteemed speakers, honored partners, and dear brothers and sisters. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. It is both an honor and a privilege for me to deliver this vote of thanks on this momentous occasion. Today has not simply been an event, it has been the start of something meaningful, something necessary, and inshallah, something lasting. We gather here at the launch of SIRA, the Center for Islamic Research Africa, an institution whose vision extends beyond ourselves, one that seeks to understand, serve, and uplift Muslims across the African continent. One of the most powerful takeaways from today emanates from the booklet Mapping Muslims in Africa by Dr. Ismail Vadi. The booklet demonstrates a simple but profound reality. To name a few, one is that while we may know and deal with a great deal about Muslims in other parts of the world, many of us know very little about Muslims across Africa. And despite Africa being home to hundreds of millions of Muslims, our understanding of their history, diversity, challenges, and contributions remain limited. Inshallah, through this initiative, as well as this booklet, we are taking a first step towards correcting that imbalance. It reminds us that the Muslim Ummah is not distant or abstract. It is right here, across this continent, rich in diversity, resilience, and potential. Perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that every journey begins with a single step, and that our gathering here today is that first step. There are many individuals and organizations who have contributed towards making today possible. Firstly, we extend our deepest gratitude to the SIRA Advisory Group members for their time, dedication, and vision in establishing this institution. Your efforts have laid the foundation for something truly impactful. We would also like to thank the MSA for partnering with us, particularly for their support in assisting with this initiative and securing the venue. Your collaboration has been invaluable. Our appreciation goes out to Cage International for their guidance and support in the lead up to this launch. The insight and experience passed down from them has been instrumental. A special thank you to all of our speakers for their time and valuable insights they have shared. You have not only informed us, but you have inspired us. We would also like to extend a heartfelt thanks to Hafiz Uthman and Maulana Abu Razak for their contributions A special acknowledgement to Dr. Ismail Vadi for his time and preparation in compiling the booklet, Mapping Muslims in Africa. As I mentioned, this work is not only informative, it is necessary in that it challenges us to broaden our perspective and deepen our understanding of Muslims across our continent. To all our attendees, we thank you for your time and presence. Your support gives life and meaning to initiatives like this. A special acknowledgement to our volunteers who have worked tirelessly behind the scenes, from setup and registration to books and media. Your efforts are deeply appreciated. We would also like to thank Ashraful Aid and Maulana Suhail Wadi for their support. A special thanks to the Ahmed Kadrada Foundation for providing runners and volunteer assistance, and to the Salam Foundation Search and Rescue Team for their support. Our gratitude extends to our caterer, Hafsa Adia, for the refreshments provided, and to Gravity Printers for their excellent work in printing and branding material for today's event. We would also like to acknowledge our contributors and donors, Broadway Sweets, Nazira Osman, Nizami Kala, and Okaf, and Firoz Boda, Nadeem Muhammad, Muhammad Varachia, Suli Salaji, and Klevas, as well as many other generous individuals. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward all our contributors and donors abundantly. Lastly, we would like to thank our media partners, Salam Media, Hilal TV, Debrief Network, Channel Islam International, and Radio Islam for helping us to share and amplify this important initiative. In closing, and as we reflect on today's program, we are reminded that while this event comes to an end, it does not mark an ending, but rather the beginning of our journey. The responsibility of understanding, connecting, and uplifting Muslims across the African continent is now one that extends to all of us. If there is one thing that we take away from today's event, let it be this: that knowledge leads to awareness, awareness leads to responsibility, and responsibility demands action. Inshallah, through initiatives like this, we move from being observers to being contributors. We make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept all of the efforts made today, grant barakah in this initiative, and allow it to grow and benefit communities across Africa and even beyond. May He make this a means of unity, understanding, and positive change. Jazakallah khair to every one of you for attending.
Jazakallah khair, Siad, for that. I'm going to call Maulana Abdul Razak Okwayo and Alim to give us our final dua, also part of Sirah. And Maulana Abdul Razak, I think, embodies the kind of Alim who is on the front lines, always joining us at protests and various activations. So Jazakallah so much for that, Maulana.
Alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Allahumma salli wa sallim ala Sayyidina wa Maulana Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina wa Maulana Muhammad. Salatan tunajjina biha min jamil ahwal wal afat wa taqdi lana biha jamil hajat wa tutahhirna biha min jamil sayyiat wa tarfa'na biha indaka a'la darajat وتبلغنا بها أقصى الغايات من جميع الخيرات في الحياة وبعد الممات إنك على كل شيء قدير. اللهم ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم افتح لنا بخير واختم لنا بخير. اللهم افتح لنا بخير واختم لنا بخير. اللهم سهل لنا مما نريد ونجنا مما نخاف بفضلك يا لطيف. اللهم الطفنا المقادير يا أرحم الراحمين ووفقنا اللهم إلى ما تحب وترضى. اللهم اشف مرضانا وارحم موتانا وانصر الإسلام وعز المسلمين. اللهم انصر الإسلام وعز المسلمين. اللهم استخدمنا لنصر دينك ولا تستبدل بنا يا أرحم الراحمين.
اللهم إنا نسألك العفو والعافية والمعافاة الدائمة في دين ودنيا والآخرة. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على سيدنا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم. سبحان ربنا رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Thank you to everyone. There's tea and coffee. So if you didn't get to have your tea when you just got here, or if you'd like a second cup, please help yourself. Jazakallah khair.